The reason I got interested in, I shouldn't say interested, suspicious of the official story was in my area of expertise, which is aircraft flight control. And I spent many years in my career, more the earlier years, conducting experiments to try to find characteristics of airplanes that fly better. So I knew about changing control configurations and displays, and then I would have test pilots that would evaluate these. So basically setting up an experiment to evaluate how an airplane flies and what tasks you give the pilots, all those kind of things. That was just many years of experience. So when I had that experience, and the first thing I looked at is the airplanes coming, flying into the towers. I just thought that is a task. Set aside the idea that there's a suicide involved, but just to have a pilot fly much faster than they normally would be, the closure rate of this target, I viewed it as a target of the tower, would be almost an impossible thing to hit that reliably. Because if anyone planned this program, they would obviously plan it to be successful. They don't want the plane missing the tower and where it's going to end. It would have to be a very high confidence that the tower would be struck, and that would be no question about it. So the task of flying an airplane at, which turned out to be higher speeds than the airplane is designed to go. And it turned out it's like a tip of an iceberg. As I became puzzled by something and I started looking into it, I ended up finding out these other things that are also equally puzzling. So it's one thing after another. And I did not believe that a professional test pilot would be able to reliably hit the tower without some sort of aids. So now the question is, well, were there any special guidance aids that were provided so they could be reliably striking these towers? Well, the story is no. Hijackers got in the cockpit, so there wouldn't be any special aids to help them do it. So the whole idea of a manually flown airplane, even by a very experienced pilot, just didn't add up. And so I just wanted to say that that was my starting point, and everything I've looked at since having to do with the airplanes, also having to do with the buildings, don't jive with the official story. You can't fly airplanes that fast. You can't do it reliably. You can't. It wouldn't be a successful mission because they probably would have missed the buildings if it was just counting on people that were trying to get those things down there and they would have crashed somewhere else. So that's my thought that I want to leave with you.
Okay,
What this is a way of visualizing how much that volume is. This would be the fuel left after the fireball. So here's three different ways of looking at it. A cubicle, office cubicle, 10 by 10 is a typical size, 9 feet tall worth of fuel. That would be one example. Another one is a U-Haul 17-foot truck that's 855 cubic feet of the box volume, plus you've got the cab in front. And the third example is above ground swimming pool there, 18-foot diameter, 4-foot deep. So those each are examples of 900 cubic feet of fuel remaining after the fireball in each of the two towers. The next slide will put it in perspective scale-wise to a tower itself. So you can see these little dots down there. That's how big those volumes would be compared with the size of the tower. And particularly if you remember on the tower where there's this huge ball of flames, it's the whole width of the tower. So that's an example of the size of the fireball that occurred when the building came down. And you can see what the amount of fuel would be if you believe the official story.
Just a couple questions, and then I want to have a comment too. This presentation was excellent. I hadn't been exposed to much of this, so I actually wrote some notes when the presentation was on. My first question is, which your slide just answered, was wouldn't most of that fuel, when the planes crashed into the World Trade Center, wouldn't most of that fuel been instantly vaporized? And your answer basically showed that, and so that kind of answered that question. But what I'd like to know is what is the 9/11 Commission or NIST report, what is their answer to what caused the temperatures to get so hot to melt steel?
Since I'm with AE 9/11 Truth, let me answer that. They don't admit that the temperatures got that high.
Then how does it melt steel?
The fact, well, they admit that the temperatures got,
Thermite.
let's say, 1,000 degrees centigrade less than the evidence shows. So it's kind of a marginal thing, and then they argue that, well, it turns out that was hot enough to soften the steel, but they are missing the amount that the evidence shows that the temperatures were by 1,000 degrees centigrade. So they do not admit that the temperatures were as hot as the evidence shows.
Can I add something to that? They categorically deny the presence of molten steel. I'm not talking about temperatures here. John Gross, who's a spokesperson for NIST, in fact in the new 9/11 video, he makes that reference several times. He has never seen evidence of molten steel or molten iron. And the video brings up witness after witness after witness talking about it. So, technically speaking, NIST does not agree to the fact that there was molten steel.
And then I'd like to jump over to the Pentagon, Flight 77. Let me identify myself. I'm Dave Gapp. I'm retired Lieutenant Colonel Air Force pilot. Just retired in September. 31 years. I flew fighters. I had 1 year break in service where I flew for Continental Airlines. I was based out of Newark, so I'm familiar there. I lived about a mile away from the Pentagon where that happened, and I've just recently become interested in what has gone on. But when I was watching the presentation just now, and from a pilot's point of view, I'm watching Flight 77 come from 37,000 feet, however high it was, and my I guess my question to you would be, from your professional point of view, is I'm a military pilot, and I flew all over the East Coast for a year with Continental. If you were to give me the controls to that plane, first of all, I don't think I would ever release the controls to the plane, no matter if they're going to kill me or not. But if they did kill me, I don't think you could put one of these guys in the plane and say, go fly back to the Pentagon. I think it would be, I don't think I could do it with all of my experience, because I've never operated was it a 757 or 767? I'm not sure, but they're very similar aircraft. I don't think I could do that, even with all my experience, 31 years of flying. Second of all, when I was watching that presentation from a pilot's point of view, first time I've seen this, the indicated airspeed was always 290 to 300 knots, a very level descent, very precise descent, doing that turn, coming back around. And needless to say, the evidence, the 2992, not resetting that, you would have been way too high. Exactly, let me verify what they said completely about ground effect. I've been there. I've flown that low in fighters, and with fighters being high-winged aircraft, you can get down a couple hundred feet, 500-600 knots. I've done that. But you can't do that. It's impossible in an airliner. And when I'm watching this whole thing, and I don't know where you said you got that data from, but to me, it looks like somebody went in a simulator and threw these profiles and came up with these data points to give to you guys to say, or to give to whoever they released that to, just gave you that. It looks like data made up to me to be that perfect, that precise to come